Ori and the Blind Forest is one of my all-time favorite games. It's really close to my heart, which is why I wanted this to be the first game on my channel. It's an action platformer game by Moon Studios, released in 2015, and then the definitive edition was released in 2016. It's about a young orphan called Ori who gets adopted by a creature called Naru. The game doesn't really tell us what they are. But they live happily until the forest they live in, Nibel, starts to die. After Ori nearly dies due to the shortage of food, he sets out to save the dying forest, or the blind forest as the game puts it. I will be assessing several aspects of the game, such as the story, the gameplay, and the difficulty, and rating them on a scale of 1 to 10 each, 10 being the highest or the best. This video will not have any major spoilers, so if you end up buying the game, you will still get the full experience. Let's get started. The narrative of the game is very compelling. It does a great job of pulling the player into Ori's world. One of the reasons I love this game so much is that I felt such a wide range of emotions while playing it. Everything from joy and excitement to loss and hopelessness. I won't say too much about it to avoid spoilers, but I'll give this story a 9 out of 10. The only reason I'm taking away a point is because the story about an orphan who has to save the world with special abilities is a little cliche. Other than that, the story's great, and it really makes you care about the fate of the forest and the characters. Speaking of which, part of what makes the characters so likable is the design. Characters like Naru and Ori have fairly simple and cute character designs, allowing them to have easily recognizable expressions. This is very important because the game contains very little dialogue, only a bit of narration by the spirit tree here and there. So a lot of the plot points and emotions are conveyed by the actions and expressions of the characters. But I know looks aren't everything, so let's look at what the characters are actually like. Although the characters have different traits and motivations, all of them have one thing in common. They all care about someone. Each character has someone or something that they're willing to make sacrifices for. For example, Naru cares about raising Ori. She gives him a place to live, protects him, and gives him their last piece of food. I think the characters are a solid 10 out of 10. The lengths these characters go to help each other is truly inspirational, and to me that's what makes them so memorable. Ori and the Blind Forest looks a little bit like Child of Light with its hand-painted landscapes. The main difference is that Ori and the Blind Forest is a lot more colorful. Although the colors change depending on the mood, a little bit of blue is mixed in, well, everywhere, since blue is the color of the spirit tree's light. Something else I've noticed is that the backgrounds are very detailed, and yes, I know there are other games that are also very detailed, but I think this game does it especially well. The game isn't just filled with boring fields and standard trees, there's always something interesting to look at. Something like a dead tree that Ori has to run across, or little shrubs or flower patches spotted along the path. I'll give the graphics a 10 out of 10. Not only does the game look visually pleasing, it fits with the type of story and the types of characters. It brings the game together really nicely. Since music is a big part of my life in general, I find the soundtrack of a video game to be very important. I found that usually I have to listen to the soundtrack very carefully to even hear it, since most games keep music in the background. But not this game. You can always hear the music, and there's a reason for that. The soundtrack does a lot of the heavy lifting in Ori and the Blind Forest. Everything from the events of the main narrative and the shifting of the colors to the expressions of the characters is cued and emphasized by the music. Not only that, but the main theme is played so many times throughout the game in so many different ways. It's downright incredible. The soundtrack is definitely a 10 out of 10. I'm still listening to it as I'm writing the script for the video, even though it's been like 3 years since I first played the game. There are a couple different things that make the gameplay as fun as it is. You're constantly getting unique new abilities as you progress, making the game both exciting and challenging. The level design is also very good. After getting a new ability, the player is taken to levels which require the newest skill. I think that's important both because the new ability isn't just sitting there unused and because the game gives you a chance to figure out how to use your new skill effectively. There are also lots of collectibles like spirit-like containers, energy cells, and life cells, giving you an excuse to go back to previous areas and explore them with more abilities. For all of the reasons I just mentioned, I'm giving the gameplay a 10 out of 10. Like I said, there are a lot of interesting levels in this game, and a lot of them include puzzles. Some of them are quite challenging, but I don't think they're hard enough to take away from the overall experience. The puzzles and the boss fights get harder as the game goes on, but there was something about the progression of the game that I found pretty strange. The final boss is typically the hardest in most video games, but in Ori and the Blind Forest, I actually found the Ginso tree so much harder to complete than the final boss. Maybe it's because the ability you get before the end of the Ginso tree part is harder to use than the one you get before the end of the game. I'll give the difficulty an 8 out of 10 because other than the whole Ginso tree boss fight thing, the difficulty is pretty well balanced. I realized that maybe I should have talked about the difficulty and the controls in the same section, but since I wanted to talk about 10 things in this review, I decided to address it separately. Since this game uses the entire controller and probably a lot of keys on a PC, it goes without saying that it's going to be easier for someone who's already familiar with the controller or keyboard. However, since the abilities unlock one at a time, it might be a good game to try if you're new to video games and are looking to memorize the controls. It's a useful skill, trust me. The controls are relatively easy to learn, and the game actually tells you how to use each ability before you have to use it. It's not like Little Nightmares, for example, where you're in a high-stakes situation, and then the game is like, oh, FYI, you can sprint by pressing the square button. The game gives you time to master your abilities, so I'm giving it a 10 out of 10, as in, it's a good level of difficulty. Ori and the Blind Forest is for ages 7 and up, which really surprised me actually, because I don't know if a 7-year-old kid could complete the game. Maybe I'm underestimating a 7-year-old's abilities, who knows. But I think this game would be extremely difficult for someone that young. I think they just rated it PEGI 7 because the violence isn't too graphic and stuff like that. Regardless of the difficulty, this game is intended for a younger audience and it's definitely fun for kids. I'm giving this one a 10 out of 10 too, because the game is good for the target audience and PEGI 9 isn't a thing, so I'll let the PEGI 7 thing go. The lengths of the walkthroughs on YouTube vary from 3.5 hours to 8 hours. I don't know what the 8-hour people are doing for so long. I think my walkthrough episodes added up to like 4 hours or something. That might sound short, but the first couple of times it can take up to 10 to 15 hours depending on how familiar you are with the platform you're using. My first playthrough of this game was, no joke, like 20 hours. In my defense, it was one of the first console games I've ever played. I'll give the length a 9 out of 10. It would have been nice if the game were a bit longer, but the pacing of the game was pretty good. It didn't feel rushed or anything like that. Ori and the Blind Forest is available on Xbox One, Microsoft Windows, and Nintendo Switch. On Windows, it costs €20, which is $27.24, which is 17.81 pounds. On Xbox One and Nintendo Switch, it costs €16.44, which is $20, which is 14.63 pounds. The Definitive Edition costs the same as the original on all platforms. You should definitely get the Definitive Edition, by the way, it has more abilities and lore. I think the game is reasonably priced, although I should probably mention that I'm a bit clueless about money, and I'm basing my opinion off of the prices of other games like Unravel and Child of Light, which are similar in length and quality, and they cost about the same. Because of that, I'm rating the cost to be a 10 out of 10, so take that for what you will. I think the 3 best things about this game are the soundtrack, because like I said, it moves the story along, the gameplay because of how exciting it is, and the graphics because the game just looks so beautiful. I mean, just look at it. Look at it! I think one of the game's weaknesses is its length. After you've played it a couple times, it becomes really short. Also, there's very little replay value. The player doesn't really get to make any choices during the game. I think it would have been good to have some character customization or something. Other than that, I really enjoyed the game, and despite the little replay value, I played the game about a dozen times. I just like replaying games in general. I'll probably explain why in another video. I think Ori and the Blind Forest is one of the best games out there. It's perfect from almost every aspect. The overall rating I'm going to give it is 90 out of 100. It's definitely worth buying if you like these types of games. It's really a wonderful experience to go through, and it was a huge part of my childhood. If you've stuck with me till the end of the video, I want to thank you so much for watching. It truly means a lot. I'll see you guys in the next video. I mean, I really won't, but this is a common expression, so until then, keep playing. Bye!